And as a result of that, these guys, Dodd and Frank, created the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act, which passed in 2010, I guess, right? And the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act basically mandates that all financial derivatives must go into clearinghouses. And so what we started with in 1997 with this vision of how we could become this PayPal-type engine has now been put into law. And from here forward, all financial contracts have to go through these clearinghouses. It's a huge opportunity for us because there's still a lot of stuff out there that hasn't gone through. Creating one of these clearinghouses is a technical challenge. It is a high velocity database that with incredibly complicated ability to value things using the most sophisticated models that you can think of and moving money over Fed funds wires and dealing with the Federal Reserve. So it's quite an interesting thing. It won't be easy for people to duplicate, and we've kind of landed in it, which is why our company gets a lot of notoriety. One last thing is that to show a little bit about our thinking. Earlier this year, the New York Stock Exchange, and by the way, that's what it does look like now. If you notice, CNBC cameras show you the top of that. They never show the floor because there's nobody on the floor anymore. And technology has taken today the New York Stock Exchange is an all electronic exchange for all intents and purposes, and that is a movie studio. But the New York Stock Exchange agreed to get bought by the Deutsche Börse, which is the German stock exchange. And they were going to create a new combined East-West exchange that was headquartered in the Netherlands. And so my good friend Bob Greifeld called me up and from NASDAQ, and we made amends. And Bob is a $4 billion company, and NYSE is a $7 billion company. And he wanted to buy it and try to get it away from the Germans. But he couldn't afford it, and he needed a partner, and we're a $9 billion company. So the two of us together said, we'll buy it, we'll break it in half. And we launched this bid, hostile takeover for the NYSE. And the Obama administration called us in and had a chat with us, and basically told us that we were dreaming a dream that was never going to happen. And they were never going to allow NASDAQ and NYSE to come together and have a single exchange, that it was too anti-competitive. So that deal failed, but it's actually how a lot of people in this city know who we are, because people know the NYSE, and that's the only reason I really tell the story. And we'll see, the NYSE deal hasn't been completed yet. The antitrust regulators in Europe don't necessarily like the Germans and the NYSE getting together. But suffice to say that we're learning now as larger financial services companies that it's becoming increasingly hard for us to do mergers and acquisitions. There's a different mood in the financial services world after 2007 and with this administration, but this administration is really embodying the mood of the people after the 2007-2008 economic turndown of Bear and Lehman. And they want more smaller financial services companies, not one big one. I want to just leave you with a couple of thoughts as you walk out of here, that because I feel, other than tell stories, that maybe I should impart something. The one thing that you'll notice, can you put my logo back up there? Can you turn the slide back on? I wanted to show the logo here. If you look at our logo, if you'll allow me to look at it, it's a big logo that's full of white space. And it's very clean. And if you went to our website, you're going to see a website that's kind of graphically intense. And if you think about the slides I showed you big slides of guys in funny jackets and oil rigs and what have you. And that is the way we do things today. And that is considered a very clean, well-designed logo. And I would ascribe to you that the bulk of the reason that we have that logo and that my presentation looked the way it looked and the way that I addressed you today on the stage was because of Steve Jobs. He and Apple, because obviously CEOs are the embodiment of all the people that are behind them. But to talk about how technology has changed something, I just show you an example of how one company has really changed the way we look at doing business. And so that's part of the power of technology, coupled with a user interface that is easy to use and that people like. And so he's obviously an inspiring guy in the technology world, but I see direct evidence, and I'm not even that Mac friendly. I see a direct evidence on how he's influenced me. Second thing that was interesting is I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people as the leader of a company, the leader of a successful company. And I went to a meeting one day at one of our customers, and they said, "Would you like to meet Alan Kay?" And I said, "Who the hell is Alan Kay?" And they said, "You don't know Alan Kay?" I said, "I don't know Alan Kay." So he brings out Alan Kay, and he brings out this guy, and he's all kind of disheveled, and he's this computer programmer. And I meet him, he's a nice guy, and we talk a little bit, and then I leave, and I go back, and I Google him. And this was about 2003, maybe. And so I read up on this guy, and it turns out this guy was at Xerox, and he was part of that team that created the graphical user interface that Apple ripped off, and that he created object-oriented programming language, which was embodied in a language called Smalltalk, which was the language that Edwin told me he would never use, by the way, but eventually became object-oriented programming in Java. And anyway, when I read Alan Kay, and if you go to Wikipedia or Google him or what have you, you'll see that Alan Kay has a quote, and it really impacted me. And I use it a lot in talking to employees, and more importantly, in talking to investors in our company that want to know what we're going to do next. And Alan Kay famously said, "The best way to predict the future is to invent it." And I wanted to just leave you that because it's really helped us drive our business. Is instead of trying to figure out what's going to happen, we should just figure out what we're going to do and make it happen. And that's what we did in trying to clear credit default swaps, and that's what we did in electronifying commodity trading, and by going on the internet when I told Edwin that you should be on WorldCom, and everything else that really has allowed us to show leadership came from this idea that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And the last thing, piece of wisdom that I want to leave you with is, because I'm an engineer, and I think a lot about companies, and I look at our own company, and I run it through a very simple sieve on whether or not we're making progress or not. And that is that a guy even more famous and had even bigger theories than Alan Kay was Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton's first law is that an object at rest will stay at rest. And an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted on by a force. And so when we sit around and talk about what are we going to do and how's it going and when are we going to deliver the next version of code and blah, 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 I really run it through a simple sieve, which is, is this an object in motion or is this an object at rest? Because if it's an object in motion, I don't have to worry about it. It's going to stay in motion unless somebody acts on it. But if it's an object at rest, it's going to stay at rest. And so the performance of our company, the performance of our technology team, and our ability to scale our business has largely come because we never slowed down. We never stopped the motion. And it's made it incredibly easy for me to manage because I manage with these little, tidbits of wisdom that, and you can pretty much run everything through that sieve. And I would just want to leave that with you as you think about building out your own companies, your own technologies that has really worked well for us. So I hope that was worth the breakfast. Thank you.
Have a question for our keynote speaker? Microphones are located on each side of the rear of the ballroom.
You guys want to go to work, don't you? Oh, okay. Go ahead. Anybody? All right. Thank you, guys, and congratulations to all the nominees.
I think we have something for Jeff, don't we?
We already have a sword.
Oh, you're going to get another?
It's not in my office, though, so.
No, on behalf of TAG, really appreciate you coming out today and speaking to us. And it's just a great example of how technology is put to use here in Atlanta to drive a business forward.
Oh,
so thank you so much, Jeff.
We're serious. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, keep it
This
away.
one's mine, Edwin.
Keep it away from the Dungeons and Dragons guys, okay? Yeah. Thank you.